Hi, I'm Frankie, and I'm obsessed with Warren G. Harding, and I'm on a mission to investigate the crazy life of this otherwise irrelevant president. Which is why it might surprise you that today's topic is about a book that was actually published after his death. Now, I'm not really sure how many presidential self-insert fanfics there are out there, but A Dead President Makes Answer to the President's Daughter by Anton Shrewsbury Jenks is certainly one of them. And what's interesting about this 1928 self-described, romantic, daring, fantastic, poetic, powerful, simple, moving narrative, and devastating satire is that it is based on a 1927 book called The President's Daughter, which, as evident by its many pages, is certainly a work on its own. But to keep it short, this is Nan Britton's memoirs about her affair with Harding and also about the birth of their illegitimate daughter, Elizabeth Ann Britton. So it seems like we're in for a pretty wild ride if we're reading a fanfic of a very saucy kiss and tell. Once upon a time, renowned journalist Anton Shrewsbury Jenks, who's also the author of the book, went uptown with his wife and kids to go visit some relatives, when suddenly he realizes, I'd rather be at home right now, cracking open a cold one. So that's exactly what he does. He goes home, and as he's reaching for a drink, he realizes, the fridge is broken. So instead of lamenting on it too long, he goes to bed, but then he notices a copy of The President's Daughter perched upon the nightstand. His wife had been reading it, so why shouldn't he? Well, he takes one look and is hooked. I'm telling you, he sits there for hours and he's like taking in all the drama, right? But then, suddenly, he notices a presence. Well, what could that presence ever be? The only logical answer is that it's the ghost of Warren Gamaliel Harding, 29th President of the United States of America. But why was Harding in his room? The two men both actually seem to be pretty confused themselves, until Harding remembers that St. Peter sent him down back to Earth because Jenks is supposed to confirm that Elizabeth Ann Britton, aka the child mentioned in Nan Britton's book, is actually his child. But why? Well, apparently St. Peter's reasoning is that there are two levels of heaven, one for people without kids, and that's like regular old heaven, clouds and stuff. But then there's super heaven for people who have kids, and Harding obviously wants to get up there, so he has to go to Jenks. And why Jenks specifically? Well, Jenks is described as the most cynical man in creation, so if Jenks is convinced, then Harding can be convinced, and therefore Harding can get to heaven. So the two men, they just sit around, have a nice little chat about the book, and Harding's like, well, I don't remember really any of this happening. And Jenks is like, well, Nan Britton seems to be a pretty smart girl. And Harding's like, yeah. And then he starts really defending her when Jenks brings up the idea that Nan may have had another man as the father of her child. And Harding's like, no, that's when he gets really defensive. He's like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm the father because all these other men are chopped, right? And Jenks is like, well, you never know. I mean, Nan is pretty attractive, and she's a young thing who likes to go out and flirt. And Harding gets, of course, even more defensive about that. And eventually, the conversation pretty much goes nowhere, and Harding asks Jenks what he thinks super heaven would be like, and Jenks is like, I don't know, and he kind of gives this offhanded explanation about, well, maybe it's kind of like being in a room with an archbishop who has no alcohol versus a regular bishop who might have alcohol in the back of the church. And Harding's like, you know what? I like alcohol, so I think I'm just gonna stay in regular heaven. And then, poof, he vanishes. And Jenks is like, oh god, what's that smell? It smells like raw in here. And then the next day, Jenks runs to his wife back uptown after all that fright. And his wife takes him back to the house, and she notices the fridge is leaking ammonia. And that's why he imagined Warren Gamaliel Harding sitting in front of him, having a conversation about super heaven. My personal rating is a 3.5 out of 5. I enjoyed it, but it was a bit too short for me. It was around 94 pages, but with really huge margins, so it only took me 25 to 30 minutes to read. And I mean, I love short stories, but I think with the amount of pages that it was using, somehow, despite being too short, it did spend too much time on the banter between Jenks and Harding, and the fact that it didn't really go anywhere besides Harding kind of just giving up. And I guess that's part of the satire of it. It's a little bit, again, cynical, actually. I mean, Jenks was supposedly the most cynical man in creation, but it's short and sweet. I just think the real value of this book comes from the fact that it is social commentary, and it is a response to The President's Daughter, which is a very controversial book of its time because it was written by an unwed single mother. And of course, back then and even today, unwed single mothers are amongst the most shunned people in our society, unfortunately. Now, this was particularly scandalous because of the fact that Harding had only died 4 years before it was published, and many people who read this book were claiming that Nan Britton only wanted the money. She only wanted the fame. She was shallow. Maybe she didn't really love him. Maybe he didn't really even know her in the first place. Or that she was just an obsessed fangirl. And maybe in some ways, all of those were right. But her intention was that she wanted to really provide for her daughter. That's why she was seeking attention. That's why she wanted the money. She wanted to put the truth out there. So actually, one very interesting thing about this book, though, is that it portrays Harding as being very human, and that's kind of the point of humor here. Despite him being a ghost, his humanity is the punchline, because he's always second-guessing himself. He's a romantic, but he's also trying to be logical about things. And that's different than a lot of, I guess, political satire in general, because of the fact that political satire as a genre tends to use characterized versions of the subject as the point of humor. Now, Harding's humanity actually does seem to be a pretty common theme in the books that I've read about him so far. Of course, the most obvious example being The President's Daughter. Nan Britton actually elevates him. She really idealizes him by saying that he was more than human, that he had these divine traits. While in the memoirs of his childhood friend, Jack Warwick, titled Growing Up with Warren Harding, Warwick says that he is a man, he is just human, like, it's literally just that, like, don't get any misconceptions about him. He's just a guy. And I find that very interesting, very compelling. And A Dead President Makes Answer to the President's Daughter seems to continue that conversation, like how Jenks and Harding continued to go back and forth in the book itself. It's very meta. It extends the conversation of Harding literature over time. And even though a book like this is very niche, I still think it really did have an impact on his legacy. Maybe not as much as Revelry by Samuel Hopkins Adams in 1926, but it still had an impact. It still shapes how we see him, how we characterize him, and of course, that's why The President's Daughter and A Dead President Makes Answer to the President's Daughter were very controversial, because of the fact they were actively affecting his legacy as it was being formed. Now, if you ask the average person who even knows who Harding is what they think of him and his administration, they would probably just bring up the fact that it was very scandalous. I mean, you'll have his personal affairs like the Britton affair, which produced The President's Daughter, or the Phillips affair, which produced those steamy love letters that came out in around 2014. But in terms of the government, you're going to hear things like Teapot Dome, or the Veterans Bureau scandal, or whatever Harry Doherty was doing in the Justice Department. And those political scandals in particular were starting to come out around the time that these two books were published. And of course, with these out there exposing Harding's personal life against the backdrop of the political scandals coming out, his followers most certainly thought it was in their best interest to try to suppress these, to try to do damage control. I think one can argue that this campy self-insert fanfic is a true political expose because, well, it exposes the intimate nature of the man associated with the scandals in question. It challenges society's declining view of Harding during a crucial point in the formation of his legacy. Therefore, it is relevant to the overall historiography of Harding because it represents an early stance on the man that's still unpopular today. I theorize that its simplicity is a mockery of how our knowledge of certain public figures, including our presidents, is often limited to sensationalized or otherwise one-dimensional narratives. Pop history, if you will. Honestly, I believe that the context surrounding Jenks' novella ultimately makes up for a lack of plot. As Harding doubted the paternity of his daughter, I doubted the authorship of this book because, well, what kind of name is Anton Shrewsbury Jenks? That's more in the alley of Dr. Seuss. So I looked it up, and evidently no such man named Anton Shrewsbury Jenks existed. But then who wrote this book? Because somebody had to. Well, I looked through the pages and found that it was published by the Golden Hind Press. One man associated with this company was Samuel Roth. And this is where it gets crazy. Where do we even begin with a character like Roth? Basically, he was a Jewish American author and publisher who was a trailblazer of free speech in the sense that he spent 9 years in jail because he was peddling almost unthinkable amounts of adult literature, or as they were referred to in his time, obscenities. The Supreme Court case of Roth v. United States centered around the matter of whether bans on the sale or transfer of obscenities through mail infringed upon the First Amendment right to freedom of expression. Oyas.org states the conclusion as, quote, "In a 6-3 decision written by Justice William J. Brennan, Jr., the court held that obscenity was not within the area of constitutionally protected speech or press. The court noted that the First Amendment was not intended to protect every utterance or form of expression, such as materials that were utterly without redeeming social importance. The court held that the test to determine obscenity was whether to the average person applying contemporary community standards, the dominant theme of material as a whole appeals to prurient interest. The court held that such a definition of obscenity gave sufficient fair warning and satisfied the demands of due process. Brennan later reversed his position on the issue in Miller v. California, 1973." Unquote. Though the Supreme Court seems to have ruled against him, the case ultimately loosened restrictions on what's considered obscene, so you can thank Samuel Roth for paving the way for your favorite AO3 authors. And on top of his freaktivities, he also published political exposés. One notable example was a 1933 book called The Strange Career of Mr. Hoover Under Two Flags, which claimed that President Herbert Hoover prioritized foreign interests over American ones. In the 40s, one of Roth's associates, David George Plotkin, published The Plot Against America, which was an attack on Senator Burton K. Wheeler. The FBI and House Un-American Activities Committee connected Plotkin to Roth, as Plotkin previously wrote books for Roth. Anton Shrewsbury Jenks and Samuel Roth both shared a love for scandal, politics, and of course, self-insert fanfiction. Roth happened to write a book called My Friend Yeshua, in which Roth's quote-unquote Sona has to heal relations between America's Jewish and Christian populations. Sure, I suppose mere similarities aren't exactly evidence towards the claim that Jenks and Roth were the same man, but one can wonder if the brown paper used to conceal deliveries of the president's daughter was the same as the brown paper used to conceal the delivery of Roth's publications. And as Roth believed Britain's story, I'm inclined to believe that Roth wrote, "A dead president makes answer to the president's daughter." And like Jenks, perhaps I believe this story because it's dramatic, it's alarming, it's sensational, or in his words, a moving narrative. They move us because they widen our worldview. Maybe that's all what history is, a narrative that can be interpreted in a multitude of ways, a narrative that informs future decisions by giving us clarity on the past. In the case of lesser-remembered presidents like Harding, we don't have as much media about him. Thus, the amount of narratives we are exposed to is limited, resulting in the common understanding of him being more easily influenced by individual narratives. A dead president makes answer to the president's daughter is therefore surprisingly relevant to how we develop history itself, even if it is as forgettable as its subjects. Perhaps we're all like Jenks, haunted by the contrast between our comfortable presumptions and the confusing realities of history. Thank you so much for watching. This is actually my first history video, so let me know down in the comments below what you want to hear about next. And if you want to keep up with me otherwise, then I post on Instagram and Twitter as Frankie Dacker. But until next time, adieu. After the stars are gone, many a heart is aching. If you could read them all, many the hopes that